All right, so welcome to the Dragonfly tutorial. Um, yeah, sorry I did not get to this sooner, but you know what? Better late than never. We are going to start by using our pencil to kind of define some things here, especially in the Dragonfly wing, not so much in the Lotus. But the great thing about pencil is if you do it light enough with watercolor, the watercolor will just kind of, show up over it and it'll blend in. So the key is to not do it too dark, but we want to just define where our wing is. So I'm going very light with my pencil, trying to follow my wing definition, not super heavy. It's pretty well defined on this side already. And then on this side, especially, we've got some legs and we want to make sure that those are going to be able to be seen. So I'm just going to give them a little bit of an edge. Not too much, just enough. And then a little bit more on the wing. That's probably really good. Now for all these little filaments inside the dragonfly wing, I can just kind of very lightly sketch over, very lightly, very lightly. And I'm kind of hitting or missing. I'm not doing all of them. And I'm not going to do the bottom wing that's showing up inside the top. I'm just going to kind of define what's happening here. Just kind of scribbling, just making marks. This one is pretty well kind of defined already on the upper right side. Just gonna give it some help, and then a little bit over here. This one's a little less defined. And I'm hoping that you're able to see that I'm not really drawing like a line. I'm just lightly sketching. There, I think that's good. Now before we start painting, I also want to just define my body just a little bit here, so I know where things are. We've got our head, we've got our eyes. Our little mandible here. And then we've got some highlights that are happening. And I actually prefer making it a little more articulated, like that. There we go. And most of this is just so when we start putting watercolor on, we don't get lost. We still know where we are. Okay. Now with the Lotus, there's a couple different things that we can do. We can leave a large amount of the bottom predominantly white. If I draw just a straight line, kind of coming down the middle, that'll help me. And then this one needs a little more help too. I'm not going to worry about these inside ones because they're going to be pretty dark by the time we get there. And then we've got this one right here. This one right here can be a leaf or a petal. I think it looks better as a petal, and the petal is going to come this direction. So the tip of the petal is actually out here, not over there. And then I've got my leaf. Just want to give it a little help defining. Perfect. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Find my blue tape. So the first thing we want to do on this one is we're going to define our dragonfly. Almost called it a butterfly. We want to get some color on the wings so that we can add some contrast. We're going to be working with a color palette that's complementary today. So we've got some pinks that are going to go on our lotus flower, and we've got some greens and blues that are going to go on our dragonfly. So kind of a split complementary. We've got our analogous friends hanging out in the dragonfly, and then our contrasting pink color down here. We will do a little bit of background, but that's going to be kind of light and wispy. Our main focus is going to be the dragonfly and the flower. Also, if you happen to have any sort of iridescent paint, this would be really fun to play with that with. I have a little bit, so I'll show you at the end how to add just a couple highlights, which is really fun. You could also use, if you were in last session's class, you could use the gold pigment that we used. What else? Yeah, anything that's iridescent's great. I also happen to have some acrylic iridescent. That would also work. Look, it even says dragonfly. Fancy. So we've got our two wings here. I want to paint them pretty light to start. I'm going to use my number 3 brush. I've got some water. And I'm going to bring some water into the middle. I'm going to work on the top one first. Actually, no, I'm going to work on the bottom one first. I'm going to work on the bottom one first. And the reason being is because we want to make sure that when we do the top one, we go over the color so it looks like they're layered. Don't mind my brain today. You can paint your dragonfly wings pretty much any color. I mean, they come in a variety of colors. I'm going to go with green because I love green. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue to my green. So it's going to be kind of a bluey green color, which is kind of perfect. I do have a lot of pigment on my brush, more than I usually would. And I'm just going to follow my outline here. I'm going to bring it up into the top leaf where the bottom leaf lives. So just a little bit there. Add a little bit of water. If you go outside the lines, that's okay. And then with my paper towel, just going to bunch it up and then kind of subtract from the middle. So it's a little darker around the edges, gives it a little more definition. And you've got some contrasting different colors happening on the top. If I add some water, I can kind of pull this color around a little bit and then subtract some more. And then I'll do this one. You could paint the legs first if you wanted. It's not going to really make a huge difference. We're going to give them a little more oomph in a minute. Okay, and subtract. All right, so we've got the two bottom wings. I'm going to come over here to this leg and I'm going to get a little bit of brown, but I don't want it super dark. So I've got a lot of water near my brown. And I'm going to tap my brush a little bit on my paper towel so that I can come in here and just define. I'll define that leg and I'll define this leg a little bit. Now this is still pretty wet, but if you go really light and if you subtract it enough, it should work. Just a little bit of color in there. Perfect. Now as it dries, they're gonna start to get these little crusty edges. And if you don't want the crusty edge near the body, just come in with a brush and kind of break it up a little bit and blend it into the body. All right. So while those are drying, I'm going to come down to the lotus. I've got some pink that I'm going to use. You could also use orange. Pink's generally the color we want. So I'm going to grab some pink with some water, and I'm just going to define my lotus shape a little bit here. I'm just picking up some of the pink that's already here and just moving it around. I'm trying not to fill in the entire petal. We want a little bit of white space. And for white space, you have multiple options here. You can just use the white space of the paper. You can use the masking fluid that we played with a couple weeks ago, or you can define it with some washi tape. So there's lots of different ways you could come in and play with this color. I got a little too much pigment. So if I add some water, I can subtract. Now on these ones that are kind of bowing out, we're going to make it a little heavier on the side that's closer to you or facing you, this side right here. And leave a nice bit of white space right there in the middle. And same thing over here. Always keep your paper towel. I'm a huge Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and fan. And Ford Prefect is always asking Arthur Dent where his towel is. And I always think of that because I've got a paper towel in my hand. Don't forget your towel. So this is just the first pass. We don't want it too dark. We're just kind of giving it a nice light wash. And while we're down here, let's go ahead and give our leaves a little bit. I'm going to use some yellowy green. I'm going to come right underneath this line. Grab some water because that came out really bright, and see if I can't pull some of that color over here. And then because this is so much more yellow for me than green, I'm going to grab some blue and just mix those together. It's okay if some of it goes into your lotus. You can also grab some and pull it down the stalk. And then I'm going to subtract. And I'm trying to subtract a little more blotchy on this one. All right, back to the dragonfly. Our wing should be ready. Mine will work for us to do the top part now. For the top part, I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to use a little more blue in my green this time. And I'm not going to pre-wet it. So come in over the legs that we defined. And then I'm going to just subtract a little bit. There we go. And over here. Now, normally I'd be like, hey, let's blow dry this and get it dry. But in this instance, we don't want to. We want the watercolor paint to leave us some natural places where it's going to kind of make little cells and be a little more funky, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You can subtract just a little bit if you've got too much water. Otherwise, we really want to just let it kind of do its own thing at this point. All right. So while the wings are working, we've got the body. For the body, there's a couple different ways we can go about painting this. I did mine kind of a Payne's gray in my original version that I'm not showing you yet. And for that, I'll need a little bit of blue and a little bit of brown. Payne's gray is a really beautiful color. It's just kind of a subtle blue is what I'm looking for. Something that looks a little bug colored. And to define my spaces, because the dragonfly is kind of flying this direction and I've got wings there and wings here, we want to make it look a little more like it's moving So I'm pulling it a little thinner on this side and a little wider on this side. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of white space in between. So I'm just going to use my brush, kind of help my articulation a little bit. I can pull this up and make my eyes. Mine's kind of leaking into my wing, which is fine. Just subtract a little bit. And then I can help some of the pooling of water by not adding any more to my brush, but just giving it kind of a place to flow, which is down this direction. And then I'm going to kind of pull this down into my, just a little bit, not so much in the wing. Just give it a little more definition. There we go. So now we need to wait for this to dry before we can come over with another wash. So we can move back down to our lotus, hoping, so yeah, that'll work. I've got some pink, and I'm gonna add just a little bit of yellow to my pink. So make it kind of a corally color, more on the pink side, but you know, just a little off. So something like this will work. And then I'm going to follow my pencil line. So I'm going to come straight down. And then I'm just going to do these short little brush strokes. Short. Bring that all the way down. There we go. Now I don't want to go right next to it if I'm going to be up at the top, because I don't want to lose my color saturation that I already have. So I'm going to come over here. I'll come straight down and then just little strokes. Define this one a little bit more. There's no wrong way to paint this in the sense. You could just fill it in if you wanted with different contrasting pinks and oranges. But what I like is just the tips. I highly suggest looking at different pictures of lotus flowers. You can kind of get your own idea of what you want yours to look like. Not all of them have to have a bunch of white space. Just remember, it's a negotiation between you and what's happening on the page. I'm not getting the same color on the screen that I'm using, so bear with me just a moment. All right, that looks a little bit better. Let's see if that'll keep working out for us here. And then remember on this one, we want to make sure that's a little darker on the petal part that's lower. Okay, if it can stay just like this, then we're in business. Let's hope. If you start to work on petals that are really close to each other, just leave a little white space in between them. I'm just doing little short strokes with my brush. Now to define this inner part, I'm just going to fill in all these middle ones here. I want it a little darker at the bottom. And then I can go in and do a little bit of light coloring in here. Just kind of take a quick look, make sure it all looks good. The main thing with this one is just have fun. Okay, so I'm going to come back up to my dragonfly, and I want to define the body a little more. So I'm going to grab some more of my Payne's gray that I made, which is blue and brown. And I just want to define the space a little bit more. My wings are dry, or at least dry enough. And then when I get to my eyes, I just want to leave room in the middle. These don't have to be perfect, right? A little bit of water. Trying to make the head a little lighter than the body. So I can break out the piece of paper towel. And use that to subtract. And then I'm going to use that to subtract along this side of the body. If it's not coming up, just add a little bit of water. There we go. I'm trying not to do this part with a straight line just because it articulates in different areas, and I can kind of show that, you know, if this would stop going in and out of focus, that would be awesome. There we go. I'm going to show that by just being a little more choppy with my brush strokes. I'm going to add a little more blue. Okay, so with what I have here already, if I kind of dry off my brush a little bit, I can pull some of this color on my brush, and I'm just defining my cells. I'm being very brushy, surface brushy, nothing real definitive, just following some lines. If it's too dark, you can always subtract it. I can also just grab some more blue on my brush. And I'm just making some cells, just a couple, just to kind of define what's happening on the wing. And I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow, come down here. And that's probably really dark, so I'm going to subtract a little bit. A little bit of yellow in here. Okay, just a couple highlights, you know, just give it some more definition. I'm going to come back down to my lotus and I'm going to grab some super high pigmented pink. And then this time I'm just going to be a little messy. I just want to put it on the tips. Just hugging the tips. So that gives us 3 layers now of pigment on our lotus flower. The only thing I'll really say is to make sure as you come down the sides that you're kind of going thinner. I do want this to be a little thicker on this one though. So for instance, this one's a little thick, so if I just kind of disappear that pink. There we go. Just let it disappear down the sides. It's more of an abstract lotus. Living things are always more difficult to paint, I feel like, because they move, you know. You can capture it in a picture, but even then it's still in motion. So be gentle with yourself on this one. It's looking pretty good. So for this inside part, I'm going to grab a little bit of my orangey pink mix. And I'm just going to come in here and kind of define this part a little bit. It didn't add a lot of water because I want it to be a little heavier in the pigment. That's looking pretty good. So for these leaves, then I don't want it to be bright green. I want to make it a little kind of more natural green. So to make a natural green, you would mix regular green with a little bit of brown. Kind of makes more of a natural color. And I'm just going to mirror what I did up there. I'm just going to do kind of some short strokes, follow my pencil line back in. I'm going to grab some water and up here in the middle, just kind of pull that water in and let that darker green kind of move up a little bit. And same thing over here. So grab this darker green. I'm going to make it a little darker under the petal. I'm going to grab some water. And I didn't fill the whole space in. I want a little bit of the white space to show, and I want a little bit of that yellow to show. I think this one needs a little more darker. There we go. Perfect. So now we've got this beautiful dragonfly up here, and it needs a little definition. So I'm going to find my brown, just my brown. And I need to put my eyes in. So I'm going to put a circle there and a circle there. And then I want to add just a little definition coming up the side here. Let that dry before you subtract. So you can always come in later and kind of lift a little bit more. His body's a little darker on this one. I like the way this guy turned out a little more as far as the body goes. I did a little lighter and then added some browns to it. Let's lift just right here. So what I did is I just grabbed some water, making an oblong petal. I'm just going to let it sit there for a minute. It's always a good time to rinse out your water or get some coffee. And then I'm going to take my paper towel and push and lift some of that off. That looks better. There we go. It's looking like a proper dragonfly. Let's do the same thing right here. So a little bit of water. Just kind of wait a minute. and then subtract. Just give him some definition. Here we go. Now, if you happen to have any iridescent watercolor paint, great. This would be the perfect time to use it. You can buy it in a tube, is where I usually buy mine. I'm using my smaller brush, and I'm going to grab some of this. And I'm just going to kind of brush it over my wing. Now, if you were in my class last session and you have this beautiful gold pigment that we made, I can reactivate it with some water. And I can use that to define. I'm trying not to do any straight lines on the wings. I'm trying to just let things move and glimmer the way they need to. I can add some highlight to my dragonfly with this. I can give it a cool little eye. I can even add it to my lotus. Nice. So you could keep playing with the wing, right? You could even use your micron pen to redefine some of the spaces. I think this is pretty good for now. So I'm going to show you how to put the background in. This part's a little trickier, so we want to make sure everything's nice and dry. So I'm going to pause while I dry mine. And I want to do one more subtraction before we do the background. So I've got my little brush. I'm adding just water, kind of in a curve from the body across the middle of the head. Give it a minute and subtract. That gives me a little more definition. So now I've got some contrast, darker on the side, a little bit lighter in the middle, which is perfect. Yay! Okay, so now we've got the background to deal with. There's a lot of real estate that we have to cover. I don't want too big of a brush, but I do have a number 10 and a number 8. I'm going to use the number 8 kind of in between here, and I'm going to start with water. I don't want to go right up against anything. I want to kind of give it a clear bit of white space, including in between the legs. So I've got some nice water happening in here. And I'm going to grab some blue, just blue. I don't want it super saturated, so I've got a lot of water on my brush. And as I bring this around, I'm just going to start pulling that blue in and out. It needs to be lighter than the wing. Right now it's not, so just keep adding water. Don't forget to have your handy dandy paper towel ready, going in between, leaving just a little bit of white space. So you may be asking, Jill, why didn't we do this first? Well, I'm glad you asked. One, you want to make sure that you don't cover up the wings, especially since they're so light. I'm going to be able to see where they are. And two, this gives it another kind of abstract quality. It's a little more ethereal. It's not, you know, bumping up against everything. It's just a different way to go about putting in a background. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it doesn't matter, and sometimes it's not so great. So as you continue your watercolor journey, just keep that in mind. It's going to work on some, not so much on others. And just have fun with it, right? Let it do its thing. So that's pretty good. Once I've got all the water kind of, you know, pushed around, and I've allowed the blooms to happen because I want some darker areas, then I can just take the tip of my brush and kind of pull it a little closer to my subject matter. I want to leave this white around his head. Just gives it a little more of an idea that he's flying towards something. And now I can grab my big brush and just grab some water and help your edges. I don't want these to dry with a solid line. Now I'm working quickly because I need to kind of cover the entire piece while it's still all wet. So we're going to come down here to the water line. I'm about 2 inches up. You can go a little farther. I wouldn't go any farther than that bottom leaf. So that's probably really good. I've got part of the stalk hanging. As I put the water in, it's making this a little fuzzy, which I want because it's underwater. I'm going to grab my blue. This time it's okay if it's a little green blue. And I'll pull this across and down. It's a little darker on one side, which is great. I'm going to add a little more color right there. And then I've got my paper towel. I'm going to twist it and I'm going to seesaw. Just give that water a little definition on what's happening. Now I've got this beautiful stalk that's coming down. I need to define that. I'm going to grab a little bit of green and then just kind of ripple it out. It's got some reflection happening, which is great. A little more blue. Just help it a little bit. If you felt like that was too much, you can always seesaw and subtract a little bit. Just want it to look like there's a little reflecting happening. Perfect. So now I've got my big round brush again. I'm adding some water up here. Be careful around your dragonfly body. I'm going to grab some blue. And the key is, as long as I come back with that blue and put it in the water, I should be fine while I just kind of disperse this around. Again, trying to stay just a tiny bit around. I'm hoping you're seeing that I'm leaving white space. Let's see. A little bit of white space. So I'm not going all the way up against the body or the wing. Just staying. And if you do, it's okay. I mean, you might have a little bleed, but that's what paper towels are for, right? And should you need another printable, just holler at me. nicely though. All right, that's looking pretty hazy and fuzzy. So now I want to put some around my lotus. And I'm definitely going to leave a line of white space around this bottom between the water and where the lotus is. More water. Pull that in. You could even use like a contrasting blue, like a periwinkle if you wanted to, just something else that'll work. All right. Well, I think that looks pretty good for our abstracted butterfly. It's no Monet, but that's okay, right? It's a Jill. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. So I'm hoping you will show me, email me, whatever would be great. This is the first one that I did. Very abstract, little more pigment in the lotus and a little more yellow kind of in the bottom. So like I said, there's no wrong way to paint your lotus. You look up some pictures, figure out, you know, like which way you like, and then paint it and send me a picture and show me. This was defined with just a thinner brush. And then I used the gold back here. So that looked really good back there. But either way, it's great. I can't wait to see what you come up with. All right, I'm going to go get ready for tonight so we can paint some ice cream cones. I'll talk to you all later. Thank you.